Omar Lutfi here with Lutfi Innovations. Today I'm going to talk about my CNC machine. A few years ago I bought a Shapeoko XXL CNC machine, and here's the current state of it. I thought I'd show you some things I did. None of this is truly revolutionary, but I think there's a few helpful hints here that could be useful to someone who's just starting out. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the wasteboard. I cut this one a little smaller so I have some room around the edges, because I found I wasn't using the whole thing very often, and there were times when I wanted to have something down here that needed a little bit extra height, so I made this one smaller. The second thing I did was I took the CNC machine and I put it as far back as it could go and drilled holes through the wasteboard and the particle board below it over here. So these two holes are as far back as it would go. And then I drilled a hole in the front and then just jogged it over to this side. So I had 4 holes. Once I had those 4 reference holes cut, I could find the center of the wasteboard very accurately. Then I cut the back ends to put these little T-track doodads on the back. And then I flipped it over and lined up those holes again so I could cut out these nice little grid marks using a V-bit. And this made sure that the holes I drilled from the bottom were lined up very nicely with the grid that I drilled on the top. And I also ran a little channel around the edge just to show me the absolute furthest distance the machine could travel. The next thing I did was I made a little L piece to be able to mount onto the wasteboard so I can very quickly and accurately place pieces of material. And right after I finished this, I said, oh, it'd be nice if there were some units of measurement. So I redid it, and I made it with these nice inch marks on here, which allows me to very quickly decide how big a piece of material is. Now that this piece is attached to the wasteboard, I can get my square out here, and you can see that those line up pretty close. I also glued some thin strips of sandpaper on the inside of this, so hopefully the pieces that are resting up against it will slide around less. Next, I made a series of cams and wedges to help hold down materials. So I've got small, medium, and large cams, and each one of these can fit one of these screws in here, and you can tighten it down by hand mostly, and use a drill if you need to, and it'll help you hold down your work pieces. I'm not saying I invented cams, but these are pretty useful. The next thing I did was I made some wedges, and some of them have holes in them so I can fit them into the wasteboard. And then I use one of these, and I again taped sandpaper onto both sides of these, and so you can use that, and you can use a smaller wedge if just depending on the piece you want. You just kind of have options, and I've actually combined the wedges and the cams together in different ways, and these are all very useful, and I think it's a good beginning thing to build on your CNC machine because none of these are particularly difficult with the software, and it's a good way to get the hang of building things. And finally, if I really need to work around the edges of something, I use the blue painter's tape and super glue and this accelerator. And basically what you do is you put tape down on the wasteboard, and you put tape on the on the bottom of what you're trying to hold down, and then on one side you put the super glue, and on the other side you put the accelerant, And then when you squish them together, you have about 3 seconds to decide where you want it because it's going to set that fast. When you're done, I pry it up with a spatula or something flat, and it's a really great method if you absolutely need to get around the edges of what you're working on. Well, that about wraps things up. I'm not saying I invented any of this, but I think there's a few things I did that were useful and helpful, and I just thought I'd like to make a video of all of this in one place, and hopefully that will help someone in the future who's learning how to do this for the first time. Thank you for watching. Bye.